All right, what's going on there, fellas? I'm trying to stay a little bit more active with the channel, so I was eating my breakfast this morning, scrolling through YouTube, and I decided to click on like a random RP video. No, this isn't a standard Dr. Mike bashing video because that's very popular right now. I just had some thoughts on it that I wanted to share with you guys. So I think it was Nick Best. They were taking him through a workout, and they're pretty open about how when they take people through workouts, it's not the way they expect you to train most of the time, right? They don't expect you to train that hard the majority of the time. And there's also a consideration there when they're taking a guest through a workout, they really don't want to get them hurt. That would be a bit of a bad look. So they're employing kind of load limiting strategies for injury risk management, but becomes a bit of a flex like, look, we can get hard work out of any weight. And I'm sure people are quite sore from these workouts the next day, but I have maybe some thoughts. So one thing you will see them do, right, is they'll take a exercise with a large range of motion. Cool stretch mediated stuff is kind of the talk of the town right now. And then they will select a higher rep target. So it might be a 20 rep target where, okay, well, if you can do 20, we'll add weight the next set. And if you fall below 15, right, we need to drop the weight back. They'll employ a high rep target as well as employ a pretty exaggerated controlled negative, right? So a cadence for our negative. So as I said, I understand that some of these things are being done specifically for these videos where they take people through workouts, but as far as I can tell looking at his stuff, Dr. Mike himself does generally like employing both the higher rep target alongside the controlled negative, so both of these things in tandem seem to be also put into practical use for their own training. Now, both of these things are done primarily for like two reasons, right? We suspect we get similar growth from 5 out to 30, so the higher rep target isn't any more hypertrophic. Again, it's a way to limit load on the bar, potentially lower our risk of injury because yes, less weight is probably less likely to injure us, so it's an injury risk mitigation type thing. Maybe, sure, it's easier on the joints. We could take that one as a positive. And then there's the whole SFR thing, right? If we can get more out of less weight, we're trying to limit the fatigue, maximize the stimulus. But then that's paired also with pretty controlled tempo. Again, the tempo is for a similar reason, right? Limit weight on the bar, potentially for the joints, potentially for fatigue, but most of all for injury risk reduction. And I like both of these strategies a good bit. I don't like when they're done together. And we don't really have any reason to believe that the slow negative is any more hypertrophic. It is truly more just a load limiting strategy. But when we're doing these relatively safe, relatively stable exercises, right, saying blanket every video we watch, you should be doing a slower negative. Well, why, right? The injury risk associated with lifting weights is relatively low to begin with, especially on some of these movements. So I just think that saying that everything needs an exaggerated slow cadence for the negative on all exercises, I don't know. I think it's verging on fear-mongering. These are relatively safe activities. Maybe we'll pick up a small tweak once every couple months as a rapid rehab. But I don't know if I necessarily like that as a blanket critique of any lift anyone's doing is he should be going slower on the negative. Well, why? It's not any more hypertrophic and it's already an inherently pretty safe activity, assuming he warmed up well for the exercise and is using a work that was well selected. It's safe to begin with. I don't necessarily think we need to be hyper obsessing about minimizing injury risk maximally at all times because it's pretty safe to begin with. Now, there's a crowd out there that isn't necessarily a huge fan of those higher rep targets to begin with, right? They're like, yeah, 5 to 30 is effective, but practically we probably want to stay on the lower end of that. These are people that are really, really diehard believers in the effective reps hypothesis, that like the last 5 or 6 reps before failure is really what the lion's share of the growth comes from. And following that hypothesis, right, let's say we do a set of 8, we're only doing 2 reps that are ineffective. Now, I would argue those reps aren't entirely ineffective. I think that the effective reps hypothesis is a very helpful lens to view things through, but it's not like a harsh cutoff. I'm gonna go answer that phone call. All right, peak professionalism. Max was calling me. But yeah, there's some people that really die-hard effective reps guys would say, okay, well, when we do a set of 20, we still only get the 5 effective reps at the end, and we're using a lot of energy for ineffective reps. I don't take it that far. I think sometimes we can tighten down and maybe exert less energy on a bunch of reps that are less stimulative. It's also kind of the model behind like myo reps, or as we used to call them, rest pause, is we do a set of 15, right? We get those 10 ineffective reps out of the way, we get our 5 effective reps in, we take 10 breaths, and then we do 5 more effective reps. Take 10 breaths, 5 more effective reps. The idea kind of being it's similar to doing the 3 sets of 15, but we almost get to skip the ineffective reps when we start getting towards those reps where we start getting that slowing in movement. We get that maximal cross bridging. We get those high threshold motor unit current, blah, 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 right? Whole effective reps when things start to slow is probably when they start to get a little bit more effective. Now, I don't necessarily agree with this. I don't worry about that shit too much. I like high rep targets. There's certain exercises where just practically I think higher rep targets lend themselves to the exercise better. And then there's certain exercises where a lower rep target lends itself better. So I will employ either of these things, right? Maybe I'll do a set of 8, but if I want a load reduction for either fatigue management or for my joints or for injury risk management, I'll employ a tempo on that set of 8, or I will do a 20 rep set. I don't like combining the two because then the set takes such a large amount of time. I think we start running often into energy systems being our limiting factor, lactic acid being the limiting factor, frankly, just mental toughness being the limiting factor. Because when you watch these workouts, right, there's a force velocity relationship. The bar will slow when we start getting closer to failure. Now, how much it slows probably does change between athletes. There was a whole beef between Dr. Mike and Lyle McDonald saying that Dr. Mike doesn't get sufficient bar slowing to indicate he's at the proximity to failure he thinks he is. Maybe with advanced athletes, things tend to slow it a little bit less. I've seen that myself. But you'll see a lot of in these RP workouts, they're not actually slowing down very much. Their proximity to mechanical failure probably does leave a little bit to be desired. Now, do they get wicked sore and probably grow quite a bit from these workouts because it's novel? Yes, but it's probably not the most efficient use of time. And it's probably not the most efficient way. Like, they're like, oh, look at how much we're getting out of little weight. We're saving you energy. Good SFR. And it's like, I don't know if doing a bajillion reps before we start getting to difficult reps and having to dig so deep into our mental reservoirs to do a 2-minute long set of hack squats is any more effective than taking a heavier weight and employing that same cadence, or going a little faster and getting to those difficult reps within a reasonable margin. So I just don't like implementing the exaggerated tempos in tandem with high rep targets. I will do one or the other if I want the benefits of either of these things because they're used for similar reasons. Let me know if you guys have any thoughts. This is not something I feel super strongly about. I'm not a bodybuilder. I am a big fat man that tries to lift heavy weights, but just something I had a passing thought about. One last note in editing. A few times through the video, I said controlled negative when I meant the exaggerated tempo on the way down. I think, my personal belief, for hypertrophy training, we should always be looking for a controlled negative, and that's the only cadence really I ask my lifters to do unless we're doing a variation where we have a tempo. All I don't need a 1 or a 2 count. I just want you to display control on the negative on basically every movement, bar, maybe some ballistic stuff like, yeah, you're not going to control the negative on a kettlebell swing. Although, if it doesn't look like you have control of the weight at all, that might even be bad. So, yeah, control is generally the word that I look for as universal. Probably should have been saying tempo, like an exaggerated or a slow tempo here. A couple of times I misspoke.